I kept thinking that maybe this was all some kind of nightmare. But no, this was absolutely real. In front of me sat an empty chair where just 1 minute ago, Landon had been sitting. My blind date had vanished into thin air. He sent me a text message that read, "Sorry bro, got an emergency, you can cover the bill." And then he blocked me. I stared at my phone in disbelief, as if some miracle might suddenly occur and change what just happened. But nothing changed. My wallet held exactly $4, and this Italian restaurant's bill was probably 10 times that amount. My breath caught in my throat when the waiter approached my table and placed the bill down with a professional smile. Sweat began forming on my forehead. How was I supposed to explain that I had no money to pay? My eyes automatically drifted across the restaurant to where a man sat completely alone. Yet his presence seemed to fill the entire room with an undeniable weight. His eyes were locked directly on me. He was watching me not with amusement, not with pity, just a deep, penetrating stare that seemed to reach into my very core. His personality radiated danger. A perfectly tailored black suit, dark hair slicked back with precision, and a jawline so sharp it could cut through steel. I knew instantly that this was no ordinary man. This was the man whose name echoed through whispered conversations all over the city. James Mercer, the Mafia boss who controlled half the underground operations in town. My heartbeat accelerated rapidly. I desperately wished he hadn't noticed me, but it was far too late for that now. He had already seen everything, and perhaps he understood my entire situation better than I did. I lowered my gaze and gripped the bill tightly in my trembling hands. Should I try to sneak out through the back entrance, or should I sit here and face the humiliation that was inevitably coming my way? That's when I heard them footsteps approaching my table, slow, confident, deliberate, and I knew exactly who they belonged to. Having trouble with the bill? His voice was low, dangerously calm, like the quiet before a storm. I lifted my head slowly and found myself looking up at him. James Mercer stood directly in front of me. My voice got stuck somewhere in my throat. I couldn't form a single word. He seemed to understand my silence perfectly, and then he pulled out an envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to the waiter. "Add his bill to my account," he stated, and the waiter nodded immediately as if receiving orders from royalty. I sat there in complete shock. Why would he pay for my meal? Nothing about this situation made any logical sense. He turned toward me, and this time he leaned down slightly, bringing himself to my eye level. His breath was close enough to my ear that I could feel its warmth when he whispered, "You're not leaving here alone." I had assumed he would simply pay and walk away, but that's not what happened. He reached out and took my hand gently but with unmistakable firmness and pulled me up from the table. My breathing stopped completely. "Let's go," he said, and I found myself following him without any resistance. The cold night air outside brought me partially back to my senses. My heartbeat felt completely chaotic. His car, a matte black Jaguar, waited at the curb. He opened the passenger door and gestured for me to get inside. "I'll drive you home," he stated matter-of-factly. I wanted to refuse, but somehow I couldn't find the strength to do so. As he settled into the driver's seat, he turned toward me and asked, "What's your name?" "Peter," I managed to say, trying desperately to keep my voice steady. James smiled, and it was the first time I'd seen any softness in his expression. But that smile was so dangerous that I felt like I'd just taken the biggest risk of my entire life. The engine purred to life and we pulled away from the restaurant. I kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead, trying to process what had just happened. A complete stranger, not just any stranger, but the most dangerous man in the city, had just rescued me from public humiliation. My mind raced with questions. What did he want from me? Why would someone like him even notice someone like me? I glanced at him from the corner of my eye. His profile was striking, almost intimidating. Strong features, focused expression, hands gripping the steering wheel with practiced ease. He drove like someone who was always in complete control. "You seem nervous," he observed without taking his eyes off the road. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice betraying me with a slight tremor. He let out a soft sound that might have been amusement. "You're a terrible liar, Peter." The way he said my name sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. We stopped at a red light and he finally turned to look at me fully. "That guy who left you there, Landon, he's done this to at least 3 other people this month." My stomach dropped. You know him? I know a lot of things, James replied cryptically. The light changed and we continued driving. But now my curiosity was overwhelming my fear. Why were you at that restaurant tonight? I asked, finding a small amount of courage. He was quiet for a moment, as if considering whether to answer. I had business nearby. Saw you walk in looking nervous. Saw him arrive late, looking smug. I've seen that pattern before. My chest tightened. So you were just watching. I was waiting to see if my instinct was correct, he admitted. And when I saw him leave and saw your face, I knew exactly what had happened. There was something protective in his tone that I didn't quite understand. This man didn't know me. We'd never met before tonight, yet he'd intervened without hesitation. Thank you, I finally said, realizing I hadn't properly expressed my gratitude. For paying the bill, I'll find a way to pay you back. I don't want your money, he interrupted smoothly. Then what do you want? The question came out before I could stop it. He pulled up to another red light, and this time he held my gaze for several long seconds. I want to make sure you get home safely. That's all. But something in his eyes suggested there was more to it than that. Something deeper, more complex. The light turned green, but he didn't move immediately. Finally, he accelerated again and I realized we were entering a part of town I didn't recognize. Expensive high-rises and gated communities surrounded us. This isn't the way to my apartment, I said, a new wave of anxiety creeping in. I know, he said calmly. I'm taking you somewhere safe first. We need to talk. I kept expecting James to turn around and head toward my neighborhood, but that never happened. Instead, he continued driving further from the city center into an area where luxury buildings and private estates dominated the landscape. My pulse quickened with each passing mile. Where exactly are we going? I asked, unable to hide the nervousness in my voice. James didn't look at me, just took a long breath as if making some kind of internal decision. My place. He answered simply, then added, I don't have your address, and right now you need to be somewhere secure. Secure? This man himself was the definition of danger, and yet he wanted to keep me safe. Nothing about this situation was making any sense. But I found myself unable to protest. We'd already passed through a security gate, and when we pulled up in front of his mansion, my eyes widened involuntarily. This wasn't just a house. This was an empire. The interior atmosphere was completely different from what I expected. He led me into a spacious lounge where a fireplace crackled with warm flames, and the lighting was dim but sophisticated. He removed his jacket while saying, "Have a seat." I started to sit in the middle of the sofa, but he came and sat directly beside me, closer than necessary. I flinched slightly, and he noticed. "Do you think I'm going to hurt you?" he asked, and there was a slight edge of challenge in his tone. "No," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. James poured himself a glass of whiskey, then surprisingly offered it to me instead. "Relax, Peter." The way he said my name like he was claiming ownership of it somehow. I took the glass but didn't drink. His eyes remained fixed on me, intense, searching, as if trying to read my thoughts. "Why did you agree to go on that date?" he asked suddenly. I was caught off guard by the question. I hadn't expected this level of personal inquiry. "Because I was lonely," I admitted, embarrassment coloring my cheeks. "And Landon seemed genuine when we chatted online." James gave a dry, humorless laugh. "Landon? He's a professional con artist. He's pulled this same stunt on several people recently." My hands went cold. "You knew about him beforehand?" "Yes," he confirmed, and now there was a harder edge to his voice. "I was at that restaurant specifically because I knew he was going to do this to you." My heart began racing faster. "But why would you care?" He set his glass down on the table and looked directly into my eyes. "Because from the moment you walked into that restaurant, I couldn't take my eyes off you." Silence fell between us. Heavy, meaningful. My breath caught in my chest. "I usually stay far away from people like you," he continued. "But you're different. I never imagined anyone could be so direct." Heat flooded my face. Then he reached out and his fingers lightly touched my cheek. For a single moment I froze completely. His touch was dangerous but somehow addictive at the same time. "Peter," he whispered, "you should stay far away from my world. But now that I've found you, I'm not letting you go." and that was the first time he came close enough that I could feel his breath against my skin. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest, and I knew there was no turning back now. I should have been terrified. Everything about this situation screamed danger. Being in a mafia boss's home, sitting alone with him, feeling this inexplicable pull towards someone I'd just met. But instead of fear, I felt something else entirely. Something I couldn't quite name. I don't understand, I finally managed to say. You don't know anything about me. Why would you go through all this trouble? James leaned back slightly, giving me a bit of breathing room, though his eyes never left mine. You're right, I don't know your favorite color, where you went to school, what you do for work, but I know what I saw tonight. And what did you see? I challenged, finding unexpected boldness. I saw someone who deserves better than being humiliated by a worthless scammer. I saw someone genuine in a world full of fakes. And I saw someone I wanted to protect. The word protect hung in the air between us. I can take care of myself, I said, though even I didn't fully believe it. Can you? He asked, not unkindly. Because from where I'm sitting, you were about 30 seconds away from being arrested for theft when I stepped in. He wasn't wrong. I lowered my gaze, feeling a mix of shame and gratitude. I would have figured something out, I muttered. Maybe. Or maybe you would have ended up in a situation much worse than just embarrassment. His hand moved from my cheek to gently tilt my chin up, forcing me to meet his eyes again. I'm not trying to make you feel weak, Peter. I'm trying to make you understand that accepting help isn't a failure. Something in his words struck deep. How long had I been pushing people away, insisting I didn't need anyone? How long had I convinced myself that being alone was the same as being strong? Why do you care so much? I asked quietly. James was silent for a long moment, and I watched something shift in his expression, a crack in that carefully controlled exterior. Because I know what it's like to have no one, he finally said. I know what it's like to face the world completely alone, to build walls so high that nobody can reach you. And I saw that same loneliness in your eyes tonight. My throat tightened. You don't seem lonely, I observed. You seem powerful. Power and control are just masks, he said softly. They don't keep you warm at night. They don't fill the empty spaces inside. I didn't know what to say to that. This vulnerable side of James was completely unexpected. The dangerous mafia boss had suddenly become just a man who understood pain and isolation. Stay here tonight, he said, and it wasn't a command, it was a request. Soft. Almost vulnerable. I have work early tomorrow, I started to protest weakly. I'll have you back in time, he promised. Just don't leave yet. And looking into his eyes, seeing that genuine plea beneath the tough exterior, I found myself nodding. Okay, I whispered. I'll stay. I thought maybe James was simply being kind, offering me a place to stay for the night out of some sense of responsibility. But the intensity in his gaze told a completely different story. He reached out and cupped my face in both his hands, then leaned toward me slowly. My breathing stopped entirely. His lips came closer to mine, dangerously, impossibly close. And then he kissed me. It was slow, deep, and possessive in a way that made my entire body respond. This wasn't my first kiss, but the effect it had on me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. Something inside me seemed to explode, a feeling I couldn't possibly put into words. When he pulled back, he studied my face carefully. You didn't push me away, he observed, and there was genuine surprise in his voice. I couldn't form a coherent response. I just stared at him like I'd lost all ability to think. James gave a small, genuine smile, not the dangerous one from before. Good, he murmured. And then he kissed me again. This time I didn't even try to resist. My hands moved on their own, finding their way to his shoulders, and he pulled me closer against him. His control over me felt absolute, and I found myself forgetting who I was, where I was. Everything except the sensation of his lips on mine. When we finally broke apart, I was breathing heavily. James, I started to say, but he moved to speak directly into my ear. I need to keep you safe, Peter. You don't understand the danger you're in. What do you mean? I asked, confusion mixing with lingering traces of fear. James stood and walked to his phone, then showed me a photograph. It was Landon, But not just him alone. He began naming 3 other people who had been scammed by him in recent weeks. Each one had reported him to the authorities, but somehow nothing had come of it. These people all fell for the same scheme. Meet someone online, agree to an expensive date, get stuck with the bill. But why target people like that? I asked, trying to understand. Because people who are lonely and looking for connection are easy marks. They want to believe someone is interested in them. They ignore red flags. His words stung because they were true. I had ignored several warning signs with London. So this happens frequently, more often than you'd think. And Landon isn't working alone. He's part of a larger operation that specifically targets vulnerable people through dating apps. My blood ran cold. An operation? Like, organized? James nodded grimly. They collect personal information, financial details, sometimes even blackmail material. Your date tonight wasn't just about sticking you with a bill. It was likely about gathering data they could use later. I felt sick. And you knew about this how? Because I make it my business to know what criminal operations are happening in my city, he said flatly. And when I saw Landon's name pop up in one of my information networks, I started tracking his movements. You were following him? I asked incredulously. I was protecting potential victims, he corrected. When I learned through certain channels that he had a date scheduled tonight at that specific restaurant, I decided to be there. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but it still seemed surreal. You went there specifically to, what? Stop him? To observe first, to confirm my suspicions, and then yes, to intervene if necessary. James sat back down beside me, closer than before. What I didn't anticipate was my reaction to seeing you. What reaction? I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining. I've spent years keeping everyone at arm's length, Peter. In my line of work, emotional attachments are liabilities. They're weaknesses that enemies can exploit. So I built walls around myself and refused to let anyone get close. He paused, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. But then you walked into that restaurant looking nervous and hopeful, and something in me just shifted. I wanted to believe him, but it seemed too impossible. You're saying you developed feelings for me just from watching me sit at a table? I'm saying I recognized something in you that called to something in me, he clarified. A kind of resonance. And when Landon left you there, when I saw the panic and humiliation on your face, I knew I couldn't just observe anymore. I had to act. My emotions were a tangled mess. Fear, attraction, confusion, hope, all swirling together until I couldn't separate one from another. This is crazy, I whispered. I know, he agreed, but that doesn't make it any less real. He leaned in again, and this time when he kissed me, it felt different. Less about possession and more about connection. About 2 people finding something unexpected in the middle of chaos. When we broke apart this time, I had tears in my eyes, though I couldn't explain if they were from happiness, fear, or overwhelming emotion. What happens now? I asked shakily. Now you stay here where you're safe, James said firmly. Tomorrow we'll figure out the next steps. But tonight you're under my protection. I barely know you, I protested weakly. And yet you trust me enough to stay, he pointed out. Why is that? I thought about it for a moment. Because despite everything, despite who you are and what you do, I don't feel threatened by you. I feel seen, like you actually care what happens to me. I do care, he said with such conviction that I couldn't doubt him. More than I should, probably, more than is wise. But I've never been particularly good at doing the wise thing. He stood and held out his hand to me. Come on. I'll show you where you can sleep. I took his hand and let him pull me to my feet. As we walked through his massive house, I tried to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. My disaster of a date had somehow led me here to this moment, with this complicated and dangerous man who seemed determined to protect me. He led me to a guest bedroom that was larger than my entire apartment. The bathroom is through that door. There are fresh towels and toiletries. If you need anything else, my room is just down the hall. Thank you, I said softly. For everything. James stepped closer, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Peter, I need you to understand something. Once you're in my world, once I've claimed you as mine to protect, There's no easy way out. People will see you as connected to me, and that comes with risks. Are you trying to scare me? I asked. I'm trying to be honest with you, he corrected, because I want you to make an informed choice about whether you want to accept my protection, or if you'd rather I arrange for you to disappear somewhere safe where neither Landon nor I can reach you. It was a genuine offer. He was giving me an out. But as I stood there looking up at him, feeling the warmth of his presence, remembering the way his kiss had made me feel alive for the first time in years, I realized I'd already made my choice. I'll stay, I said. His eyes flashed with something intense. Relief, satisfaction, possessiveness. I couldn't quite tell. But then he smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Good, he said simply. And then he kissed my forehead gently before turning to leave. Good night, Pete. Good night, James, I whispered as he closed the door behind him. And as I stood alone in that beautiful guest room, I knew with absolute certainty that my life would never be the same again. When I woke up the next morning, I found myself in James's bed. I had only a vague memory of last night, how I'd insisted on sleeping on the couch, but he'd refused to allow it. You won't be comfortable there, he'd told me firmly. Sleep here with me. When I hesitated, he'd added quietly, I won't touch you if it makes you uncomfortable. And he'd kept his word. He'd simply laid down beside me, close enough that I could feel his warmth, but respectful of my boundaries. Now, in the soft morning light filtering through the curtains, I watched him as he slept. His face looked peaceful, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen before. For the first time, I was seeing him without that intense, guarded expression he wore like armor. Out in the world, he was dangerous and powerful. But here in this quiet moment, he was just a man. My heart felt something strange and unfamiliar stirring inside. His eyes opened slowly, catching me in the act of staring. Good morning, he said, his voice rough with sleep. Morning, I replied, feeling embarrassment warm my cheeks. He got up and headed toward the kitchen, and I couldn't help but notice he was shirtless. Heat flooded my face and I quickly looked away toward the window. A few minutes later, he returned carrying coffee and toast. We sat in silence, but it wasn't awkward, just comfortable and natural. Peter, he said suddenly, breaking the quiet, have you ever been in a serious relationship? I looked at him in surprise. The question felt intensely personal. No, I admitted carefully. I never felt ready for that. James reached out and touched my hand lightly. Why not? Because I've always been alone, I said, and my voice cracked slightly. I never had anyone who really understood me. James didn't respond with words. Instead, he simply took my hand and held it tightly. You have me now. A storm of emotions raged inside me. I wanted desperately to believe this was real, that this wasn't some game or manipulation. But looking into James's eyes, I saw only sincerity. My family disowned me when I refused to follow their path, he suddenly shared, his voice dropping lower. I was stunned. James Mercer, the most powerful man I'd ever met, was showing me his vulnerability. I built everything myself from nothing, but in the process I lost everyone who mattered. Trust, friendship, love, all of it disappeared. He paused, and I saw genuine emotion swimming in his eyes. But you're different, Peter. You still have an innocence about you that I thought didn't exist anymore. And I can't bear the thought of losing that or losing you. I was speechless. My hands were trembling. I squeezed his hand tighter, and in that moment we understood each other perfectly without needing any words at all. This connection between us was real, and neither of us could ignore it any longer. Tell me about your family, I said softly, wanting to know more about the man behind the fearsome reputation. James was quiet for a long moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. My father built an empire through violence and intimidation, he finally said. He expected me to be his successor, to rule the same way he did. But I saw what that life did to him, how it isolated him, how it destroyed any chance of real happiness. So you walked away? I asked. I tried to, he said with a bitter laugh. But you don't just walk away from that world. My father saw it as betrayal. My mother sided with him, as she always did. My younger brother, he stopped abruptly, pain flashing across his face. What happened to your brother? I pressed gently. He died, James said flatly, caught in the crossfire of one of my father's wars. He was 17 years old. My chest tightened with sympathy. I'm so sorry. After that I realized I had two choices, James continued. I could let my father's world destroy me too, or I could take control of it and change it from within. So that's what I did. I built my own organization, established my own rules. I don't deal in the same poison my father did, but you're still in a dangerous business, I pointed out. Yes, he acknowledged. But I choose who I work with and what lines I won't cross. I protect people in my territory rather than preying on them. It's not perfect, but it's better than what came before. I was beginning to understand him better, this complicated man who lived in shades of gray, rather than simple black and white. Why are you telling me all this? I asked. Because I need you to know who I really am, he said earnestly. Not the rumors or the reputation, but the actual person, before you decide whether you want to be part of my life. His honesty was disarming. What if I'm not strong enough for your world? I whispered my deepest fear. You're stronger than you think, James said firmly. You survived being abandoned and humiliated, and instead of falling apart you held yourself together. That takes real strength. I was terrified, I admitted. Courage isn't the absence of fear, he said. It's moving forward despite it. And you did that. His words settled over me like a blanket, warming something cold inside. I've never had anyone believe in me like this, I confessed. Then they were fools, James said simply. Because I can see what you're capable of becoming. He pulled me closer and I let myself lean against him, feeling the solid warmth of his chest. I want to try this, I said quietly. Whatever this is between us, I want to see where it goes. Even knowing the risks, he asked. Even knowing the risks, I confirmed. James pressed a kiss to the top of my head, tender and protective. Then we'll face them together. We spent the rest of the morning talking, really talking about our lives. Our fears, our hopes. I learned that James loved classical music but would never admit it publicly. That he read poetry late at night when he couldn't sleep. That he'd once wanted to be an architect before his family's expectations crushed that dream. And I shared things with him that I'd never told anyone. My struggles with loneliness, my fear of never being good enough, my secret dream of writing a novel someday. You should write it, James said when I mentioned that last part. What's stopping you? Fear of failure mostly, I admitted. Everything I've ever written has felt inadequate. Show me something, he urged. I don't have anything here. Then write something now, he said, pulling out his phone and opening a notes app. Just a few sentences. Whatever comes to mind. I hesitated, then took the phone. My fingers moved across the screen. He found me in my darkest moment and offered lights. I don't know if I deserve his protection, his passion, his promise of forever, but I know that for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid to hope. I handed the phone back, feeling vulnerable. James read it silently, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. That's beautiful, he said softly. And true. You really think so? I know so, he said. You have a gift, Peter. Don't let fear steal it from you. As we sat there together, the morning sun growing brighter, I felt something shift inside me. For so long I'd believed I needed to face the world alone. But maybe, just maybe, letting someone in wasn't weakness. Maybe it was the bravest thing I could do. And with James beside me, I felt ready to find out. Everything seemed perfect until one night, when a black car pulled up outside my apartment building. I'd gone back home at James's insistence. He wanted me to maintain some normalcy in my routine. But before I left, he'd given me a stern warning. If anything seems off, call me immediately. Don't hesitate. I'd thought he was being paranoid. I was wrong. When I glanced out my window, I spotted two men standing near the building entrance. Their body language radiated menace, the way they surveyed the area, the tension in their shoulders, the calculated patience in their stance. My hands started shaking. I grabbed my phone and called James. He answered on the first ring. What's wrong? His voice was sharp, alert. There are men outside my building, I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. I'm on my way, he said immediately. Lock your door and don't open it for anyone. Stay away from windows. He hung up and my heart was racing so fast I thought it might explode. I positioned myself near the door, pressing my ear against it to listen. That's when I heard them, Heavy footsteps climbing the stairs, heading directly toward my floor. My breath caught in my throat. Then came the knock. Loud. Aggressive. Demanding. "Open up," a harsh voice commanded. I remained silent, frozen in place. They knocked again. Harder this time. "We know you're in there, Peter." Hearing my name from these strangers made my blood run cold. How did they know who I was? My phone buzzed with a text from James. 10 minutes. Hold on. But 10 minutes felt like an eternity. The banging on my door intensified, and I could hear them trying the handle. Fear coursed through me. I had no weapon, nothing to defend myself with except a baseball bat I kept in the closet. I grabbed it with trembling hand. Then suddenly, everything went quiet. No voices, no footsteps, nothing. I cautiously looked through the peephole but saw no one in the hallway. Somehow this silence was more terrifying than the noise had been. Then I heard it. A loud crash from somewhere below, like someone had forced their way through the building's main entrance. My phone rang. "Jane." "Peter, I'm downstairs," he said urgently. "Come down right now. Take the stairs and don't stop for anything." I shoved my phone in my pocket and opened my door carefully. The hallway was empty. I ran toward the stairwell, taking the steps as fast as I dared. As I descended, I heard voices, James's voice and others I didn't recognize. When I reached the ground floor, I saw him. James had one of the men pressed against the wall, his forearm across the man's throat, his entire presence radiating controlled fury. "Peter, come here," James said without looking at me. I hurried to his side and he immediately pulled me behind him with his free arm, positioning himself between me and the threat. "Who are these people?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. James released the man slightly but maintained his threatening stance. "They work for Landon," he explained coldly. "You've been marked as a target." I couldn't find any words. Terror had stolen my voice. "Let's go," James said, taking my hand and pulling me toward his car. As we drove away, he said grimly, "You're moving in with me. This isn't negotiable anymore." The ride to his place was tense and silent. I kept looking in the side mirror, half expecting to see someone following us. "How did they find me?" I finally asked. "Landon had your information from the dating app," James explained. "Name? Photo? Probably your address if you listed it anywhere on your profile. These people are professionals. They know how to track someone down." "But why? I'm nobody. I don't have money or connections or anything valuable." "You're connected to me now," James said seriously. "That makes you valuable to my enemies. They see you as leverage." The weight of that statement settled over me. "Maybe I should just disappear," I said quietly. "Go somewhere they can't find me. I don't want to put you in danger because of me." James's hand tightened on the steering wheel. "You're not going anywhere," he said firmly. "And you're not putting me in danger. I chose this when I chose you. That's not changing." When we arrived at his mansion, he immediately made several phone calls while I sat on the couch, still processing everything. I heard fragments of conversation, something about increased security, background checks, tracking down associates. The full scope of James's world was becoming clearer, and it was far more complex and dangerous than I'd imagined. He finished his calls and came to sit beside me. "I've arranged for protection," he said. "There will be people watching this house 24 hours a day, and I'm putting out word in the right channels that you're under my direct protection. Anyone who touches you will have to answer to me." "This is insane," I said, running my hands through my hair. 2 days ago, my biggest problem was a bad date. Now I'm hiding from criminals in a mafia boss's mansion. "I know this isn't what you signed up for," James said gently. "I understand if you're having second thoughts about us." I looked at him, really looked at him. Despite the danger, despite the chaos, despite everything that should have sent me running in the opposite direction, I felt safer with him than I'd ever felt alone. "I'm scared," I admitted. "That's rational and healthy," he said. "Fear keeps you alert. But let me ask you this. Do you trust me to keep you safe?" I thought about it for a moment. "Yes," I realized. "I do trust you." "Then that's enough," James said. "We'll get through this together. Landon and his people won't be a threat much longer. I'm handling it." "What does that mean?" I asked nervously. "It means I'm using every resource I have to expose their operation and shut it down," he explained. "Legal channels where possible. Other methods were necessary. By the end of the week, they'll either be in custody or they'll be running so far they'll never come back. The confidence in his voice was reassuring, but I still felt anxious. What if something happens to you? I asked quietly. What if trying to protect me puts you in danger? James pulled me close, wrapping his arms around me. I've been in danger my entire adult life, he said, but this is the first time I've had something worth protecting. Someone worth fighting for. That doesn't make me weaker. It makes me more motivated than I've ever been. I buried my face against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. I don't know how to do this, I confessed. How to be with someone like you in your world. You don't have to know everything right now, he said softly. We'll figure it out as we go. Together. That word together felt like a promise and a lifeline all at once. Despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, I knew I didn't want to face any of this without him. Okay, I whispered. Together. James held me tighter, and in that moment, I felt something solidify between us. Whatever came next, we would face it as a team, and somehow that made even the scariest possibilities seem survivable. We spent that night in a safe house James maintained for emergencies. This was a location known only to his most trusted people. Completely off the grid. He stayed awake beside me for hours, keeping watch even though he'd posted guards outside. My hands were still shaking from the adrenaline, but when he wrapped me in his arms, some of the tension began to ease. Nothing is going to happen to you, he whispered into my hair. I promise you that. And somehow I believed him completely. When morning came, I found him already awake, looking more determined than I'd ever seen him. I'm going to end this situation with Landon and his operation, he stated. But you need to make a decision first, Peter. I met his gaze. What decision? Do you want to be with me permanently? My heart stopped. The question was enormous, life-changing. I couldn't speak for several long seconds while my mind raced. But then I thought about the past week, how lonely I'd been before, how much had changed since James entered my life. With him I felt protected. With him I felt understood. With him I felt loved. Yes, I said, my voice steady despite my nerves. I want to be with you. Relief flooded James's expression. He kissed me then, softly this time, with a tenderness that felt like a vow. That kiss was a promise of what we could build together. Over the next few days, everything moved quickly. James activated his network of contacts and began gathering evidence against Landon. I'd expected him to handle things violently, but instead he was methodical and strategic. He collected documentation of Landon's scams, testimonies from other victims, proof of the larger operation behind the dating app scheme. Then he delivered everything to law enforcement contacts he trusted, people who owed him favors and would ensure the case was handled properly. He'll be arrested within 48 hours, James informed me, and the sentence will be substantial: fraud, extortion, organized crime. He won't be a threat to anyone for a very long time. What about his associates? The men who came after me? I asked. Already scattered, James said with satisfaction. Once word got out that I was involved, most of them disappeared. The few who didn't take the hint have been persuaded to leave town permanently. I didn't ask for details about that persuasion, and James didn't offer any. Some parts of his world I wasn't ready to fully understand yet. So it's really over? I asked, hardly daring to believe it. You're safe now, he confirmed, and we can move forward without looking over our shoulders. For the first time in days, I felt like I could truly breathe. We were sitting in his main residence again, the danger finally behind us. I want you to move in here, James said. Not because of safety concerns, but because I want you in my life every single day. Is that something you'd consider? I looked around at the beautiful home, then back at his hopeful expression. Yes, I said. I'd like that very much. His smile transformed his entire face, making him look younger and lighter. I'll have your things moved over this week. And Peter, we'll take this at whatever pace feels right to you. No pressure, no expectations. Just us figuring this out together. The following days were surreal. My belongings arrived at James's mansion, and I began the strange process of settling into this new life. He gave me my own space, a study where I could write, a comfortable room that was mine alone if I ever needed solitude. But most nights I found myself gravitating to his room, to the comfort of his presence. One evening, we were standing on his balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. James suddenly said, "Do you know something, Peter?" "What?" I asked, leaning against the railing beside him. "Since you came into my life, everything feels different. Like there's actually a point to all of this. A reason beyond just surviving." Tears pricked my eyes, but they were happy tears. I took his hand and looked at him directly. "You've given me something I never thought I'd have, a place where I belong." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that he seemed to reserve only for me. "You've given me the same thing, a home instead of just a house, a future instead of just tomorrow." We kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, and in that moment, I understood something profound. Sometimes life brings you love from the most unexpected places. My disastrous blind date had somehow led me here, to this man, to this life, and while it was complicated and sometimes frightening, it was also real and passionate and absolutely right. "I never thought I'd fall for a mafia boss," I admitted with a small laugh. "I never thought I'd fall at all," James countered. "I'd convinced myself that emotional attachments were impossible in my world. But then you proved me wrong." "Do you regret it?" I asked. "Not for a single second," he said firmly. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, Peter, and I'm going to spend every day proving that you made the right choice in staying." "I already know I did," I said softly. "Being with you feels like coming home after being lost for so long." We stood there together as darkness fell, neither of us needing to say anything more. The journey that had brought us together was strange and chaotic, but the destination was exactly where we both needed to be. In the weeks that followed, we built a life together. I started writing seriously. Encouraged by James's unwavering support, he began delegating more of his business responsibilities, making time for the relationship we were nurturing. We had challenges, of course, learning to navigate his world, dealing with people who questioned our relationship, finding balance between safety and freedom. But we faced everything together just as we'd promised. And slowly I watched James transform. The hard edges softened, the constant vigilance relaxed. He laughed more, smiled more, seemed more at peace than his own people had ever seen him. "You've changed him," one of his trusted advisors told me one day. "In all the years I've known James, I've never seen him like this. Happy." "He's changed me too," I replied honestly. "We've changed each other." One night, about 3 months after that first disastrous date, James and I were lying in bed talking about the future. "I want to take you somewhere," he said suddenly. "Somewhere away from all of this. Just the two of us. For a whole week." "Where?" I asked, intrigued. "There's an island I own. Private, peaceful, beautiful. I've never taken anyone there before, but I want to share it with you." My heart swelled. "I'd love that." He pulled me closer, pressing a kiss to my temple. "Peter, I need you to know something. This isn't temporary for me. What we have, I want it to be permanent. I want to build a life with you, whatever that looks like." "I want that too," I said, emotion thick in my voice. "I love you, James." It was the first time either of us had said those words out loud. He went very still, then turned to look at me directly. "Say that again," he whispered. "I love you," I repeated, meaning it with everything in me. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with feeling. More than I knew it was possible to love anyone. We kissed then, deep and passionate and full of promise. And as I fell asleep in his arms that night, I realized that my story had transformed completely. What began as abandonment and humiliation had somehow led me to the greatest love of my life. Because James Mercer wasn't just a mafia boss or a dangerous man or a protector. He was mine. And I was his. Forever. Our story was just beginning, but I already knew how it would end with us. Together, facing whatever came our way. And that was more than enough. That was everything.